Well, hi again, everybody. Welcome into unanchoredboston.com. Happy 4th of July to all of you. With Bob Lobel, I'm Mike Lynch. And as always, we are brought to you by Cold Springs RV, your destination for all things camping. And where? We're in New Hampshire, of course, by the great George Gray. The big wheel, we call him, at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. Well, we've got one of the greats of all time with us right here. And the 4th of July is always a bang, and we're going to make a bang this week with the legendary Jack Parker. And as always, Bob Lobel, take it away, Robert.
All right, Mike and Jack, great to see you, Jack. It's been quite a while, but one of the four coaches of the apocalypse with Cleary and yourself, Seglarski and Fernie Flamin, and you guys coached the Bean Pots forever. How long will you get four guys had a monopoly on college coaching here in Boston?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. When I first started coaching, my first 20 years, it was the same four coaches coaching in Boston. It was Fernie was at Northeastern, Lenny was at BC, and Billy was at Harvard. And we were all good friends. And I was the young guy. They were the older guys. I was the young guy then. And Billy really took care of me when I first started coaching. He really helped me out scouting teams and helped me out getting ready for games coming up, the teams that he had already played. I was very good friends. I got to be very good friends with Fernie Flamin over the years because of that. And I was always amazed at when I first met him, when I was a kid, he was the cop of the Bruins. He was the big, tough captain of the Bruins. And I met him, and he was a gentleman. I mean, the only way you would know that he was the tough guy of the Bruins, when you shook his hand, it was like shaking a ham. His hand was so big. But he was such a nice, quiet, unassuming guy. I was always amazed at what a great guy he was, considering what I thought I knew of him as a Boston Bruin. And Lenny had the great years at Clarkson, and then came to BC, and then had a number of years there for those 20 years with me and Billy and Fernie. So it was kind of weird that the next 20 years, BC, Harvard, and Northeastern have had 3 or 4 different coaches in those 20 years. So things have changed drastically in college hockey since then.
Well, they sure have. You guys, it was the good old days. I mean, when you say it, it was like when Lynch and I were on television. You can't go back to those times. It was the best of all times. It was
pretty good stuff.
Yeah, you could do your job. It was the best opportunity you had. We could do ours. It was a great opportunity for both of us. Yeah, it's something good to look back on. It
was nice to have a personal relationship with you guys. That were covering the games and reporting the games, and brand name guys on the big channels in Boston. And
well, we're not that bad, Jack. I mean,
I never had any problem with any of you.
Why would we ever have a problem?
Well, neither one of you went to BC, of course, so that made it a lot easier.
Well, the other guy went to Harvard. What about that?
I have no problems with that. I've always been a Harvard fan.
Okay, that's good.
Hey, Jack, I'm not going to bury the lead here. The big news happened over the past week that you were elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame. You need 75% of the vote to get there. You're one of 2 college hockey coaches in the Hall of Fame. When you started, skating on the pond, I mean, if someone told you then you'd be in the Hockey Hall of Fame, you must have said you're absolutely nuts.
Absolutely. I got a call from a couple of former players and coaches that were Canadians when it was announced that I'm getting in the Hall of Fame. And 3 of the guys said to me, every kid in Canada dreams of 2 things. They dream of getting their name on the Stanley Cup, and they dream of getting in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And I never dreamt that ever. I was hoping I could play high school hockey, but my life happened to me. I don't know how it happened to me, but it just unfolded somehow. And I became a hockey coach by accident, and I became a hockey player by accident, and then I became a hockey coach by accident. And then I remember Jack Kelly called me up the day I got the job at BU and wishing me luck. And I told him, Jack, I know I won't be on this job 10 years like you were. And I was right. I was on the job 40 years instead.
40, yeah, just 40.
Yeah. So it was 3 squares a day in a hideout from Boston University for a long time. You treated me pretty well.
How'd you find out about it, Jack? Who called you? Where were you? and were you surprised?
Answer the first one, the last one first. I was flabbergasted. I knew that the Hall of Fame was going to announce that day. I was anticipating that Keith Kachuk was going to get in, one of my former players, and I got 3 calls from the Hockey Hall of Fame, but I couldn't read my phone because I was out in the boat. It was so bright, I couldn't read it. So I had to go back to the yacht club and get into the porch, and I finally got the call, and it was Laney McDonald from the Hockey Hall. Jack, this is Laney McDonald from the Hockey Hall of Fame. And I said, "Oh, hi, Laney, how are you?" And to that moment, I still thought he was either calling me about Keith Kachuk or he wanted to talk to me about all my guys at the New York Rangers now, they're down there. And he said to me, "I'm calling to tell you you're getting inducted in the Hockey Hall of Fame."
Wow.
And I immediately said to him, Laney, I know who you are. And I also know you have no idea who I am. I really appreciate the call. But it was it was flabbergasting to me. I had no inclination whatsoever that it would happen ever, and I certainly didn't anticipate it yesterday or the other day.
So
Well,
tell me some of the, just name 5 people that you've heard from. I'm sure you heard from thousands that since the announcement came out.
I heard from Terry Mahar, Peter Brown, Michael Rizzioni, David Silk, all former players of mine. I've heard from people in my neighborhood up here in Gloucester that belong to the yacht club and around here. I've heard from a lot of former coaches. Jerry Yacht called me. He called me about 20 minutes after it happened. But I also heard from Billy O'Flaherty, from Billy Cleary. So, I've heard from a whole bunch of people around the game of hockey and in the game of hockey still. I think I got about 182 texts from former players.
Wow.
So it was nice, having guys check in that I hadn't heard from in a while. And that is probably one of the all-time great parts about being a college hockey coach is that you get that relationship with the players and you stay with that relationship with them even after they graduate, a long time afterwards. So it's a great part about the job.
You're not going to believe this, Jack, but I was out last night with my son-in-law and one of my daughters having dinner, and we talked about favorite sports movies. And he said his favorite sports movie was Miracle.
Yep.
And I saw it in Winter Haven. I went to the theater by myself, saw it, and it was spectacular. But I hadn't given it much thought. So you're not going to believe this. Last night, I ended up watching Miracle, the whole thing last night.
Wow.
It was a tearjerker. I'm telling you what, it was amazing. It was wow. It was right. So
Pretty good to remember when. Yep.
But so I have couple questions for you.
Go ahead.
That were about that whole 1980 Olympic hockey team, which I think we've all agreed. Well, didn't you say Sports Illustrated made it the #1 sports story of the 20th century?
Yep. They picked them. That team is the #1 sports story.
And of course, you had 4 guys on there.
Yeah, we had 4 guys, and what was nice, it was the only 4 Eastern guys. So there were no other of our big rivals. There was no other guys there except the 4 BU guys. So that was pretty cool.
So anyway, Herb Brooks was interviewing for the job. So we all kind of knew the story. And those of us who, around Boston knew you were one of the candidates. But in the movie, Herb Brooks was telling his wife he's not going to get the job. The only reason he was considered is the 2 guys before him turned it down. And he said they're looking for some guy in the East Coast. I'm just saying it was the movie whole part.
Right, yeah.
So did you, in fact, turn it down? Or what was the truth about that whole story?
What happened was 3 people were going to be invited out to Chicago and interview with the Olympic Committee for that job. Herbie, myself, and John McGinnis, from a longtime successful coach at Michigan Tech. And John was considerably older than myself and Herbie. And I flew into Chicago, and I was in my hotel room. And they came up to see me, and they told me that I was going to go on. I was going to be the second guy going in tomorrow. Herbie was going to go on first at 9 o'clock, and I was going to go on at 10:30. And I said, "When is McGinnis going on?" And they said, "McGinnis is pulled out. He's not. He didn't even come. He's decided not to continue." So it was just Herbie and I. And I went to the committee meeting, my interview, and I think there were 10 people on the committee, and 8 people were from the state of Minnesota. So I figured I was going to be second best, but I also knew that then and now that there's no question they picked the right guy. Herb Brooks did an unbelievable job. He coached a certain way when he was at the University of Minnesota and was very successful. And when he took over that job to coach that 1 year with the Olympic team, he changed everything he ever coached. Every approach he ever had, he changed completely to beat the European teams. And I know I couldn't have done that. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, that was a remarkable part of the story. You kind of have to go back and see the movie to remember all that.
Right.
That was a huge part of it. And
well, they said they did a good job on the second movie. The first movie didn't come out very well because they had actors playing the players, and they didn't look good on the ice.
Right.
The second time around, they had players playing the players. They had real skaters. They had real hockey players, and they didn't have to act that much. So the second movie, Miracle, was terrific.
Aruzione was happy with the person they cast to play his wife Donna. She said that they did a good job with her.
Yeah, they did a good job with Mike too. Mike made sure of that. I think O'Callahan and Mike were on set all the time, telling them how to work this.
Yeah, and it was at Mike's moment when he called them the Herbies. They put him through the Herbies,
right? Yep.
Skate back and forth. Remember Lynch? That's what he called them, the Herbies. And we'd go back, and then again he'd blow the whistle, and again and again and again. And Aruzione said, "Mike Aruzione, Winthrop, Massachusetts," and then Herb Brooks said, well, "Who do you play for?" Meaning, a lot of these guys were in the same BU, their colleges.
Yeah.
But then he said, "The United States of America."
Yeah.
And
that's actually how that happened. That's absolutely how it happened.
It's unbelievable.
Had a problem. There was a real East-West rivalry in those days, and a problem that Herb knew he was going to have to deal with on the team. There was a bigger problem between BU and Minnesota in those days, especially BU and Herbie, because we played them in the '76 national tournament semifinals, and a minute into the game, Minnesota players jumped our players off a face-off, and a big fight broke out, and it made a mess out of it. In any event, years later, Mike Aruzione said, when we were playing Minnesota in the national tournament, I thought for sure that Herb Brooks told his team to start that fight. He said, but after I played for him on the Olympic team, I knew he did it. He said. But in any event, Herbie and I weren't on the best of terms in those years, but he was very, very good to me when he was considering my players, and he would call me about my guys and ask me about things that some people were saying bad about this guy, or what do you think about that guy? And I was so excited that those 4 guys made it, and they were such huge contributors as well.
Major contributors, and of course now, 1980 in February, you're in the middle of your hockey season,
right?
So you can't be sitting in front of a TV set, or wringing your hands, watching, biting your fingernails. How did you keep tabs on the Olympic team while focusing on who you were playing that weekend?
Well, most of the games, I remember the games were played in the morning. A couple of the games were scheduled in the morning, so I could see them. And I saw the Czech game, the last game where they had to win. Everybody thinks they beat the Russians, and that was the gold medal game, but it was not. They had to beat the Czechs, and that was a fabulous game to watch. And that was I think that was a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
But my team that year did not have a very good year. We were under 500. It was the first time I'd ever coached a team under 500, and we didn't have a very good year. And some people would see me at the end of the year and say, "Geez, Jack, tough year, huh?" And I said, "Tough year? How can you say that? We won the gold medal at the Olympics."
So the other story I wanted to couple with that was the fact that the Boston Bruins came to you and wanted you to be their coach.
Yep, that happened twice.
Yep.
And
I was just the first time it was a little. Mike Milbury was running the show for Harry, and he was the one doing the interview, and he was the guy. Harry wanted him to do the hiring, and he offered me the job and told me to take the weekend, and I come back the next. I just didn't feel right. I just didn't feel ready for it. It happened one other time when I in the late '70s when Jack Kelly was running Hartford Whalers. Jack Kelly, who was my former coach, called me up and wanted me to come and interview for his job with the Hartford Whalers. And I think I was 29 at the time. You know, I said, Jack, are you kidding me? I'm going to tell Goody how he's not back checking. I'm going to tell Ralph Backstrom how to take a face off. So it was a little bit later in my career when those two opportunities came with the Bruins. And the first one was with Mike. And he was very, very upfront with me and told me he wanted me and blah, 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 but just didn't feel right. The second time was Harry was all in on it. And he offered me the job after about a 3-hour interview and at his office. And when we come out of the office, there was a whole bunch of press out there. And he tells the press, well, we just offered Jack the job. I told him to take the weekend. It was a Tuesday. And, you know, I don't think he realized it was a Tuesday. He told me to take the weekend, let him know the following Monday. So now all of a sudden I go home and the phone is ringing off the hook. People, you know, from the news medias, you know, want to talk. So I said to my wife, Jackie, we got to get out of here. We've got to go to, so we decided to go to Bermuda just so he could get away from everybody. We were in a hotel in Bermuda. And only two guys tracked me down there. Lou Lamorello tracked me down in Bermuda, and my former BU hockey coach that was done the basketball coach that was done the Celtics coach, Rick Pitino, tracked me down. Hey, what's the story? We're going to be in the same building again, you know? In any event, I remember Louis called me up and said, you know, what's the problem? What are you thinking about? I said, I don't know. It's just a tough decision. What's the problem? I said, well, one thing the problem is when I'm at BU, Lou, I'm the boss. You know, I decide everything. If I'm the Bruins, I'm not the boss. You know, Harry's the boss. His assistant general managers come in. They can come in and tell me, don't play this guy, play that guy. Louis says to me, of course, Louis is the very successful GM at the New Jersey Devils at the time and president. Louis says, yeah, that's the way it is up here, Jack. When I meet with my coach every morning at 7 a.m. I said, really, Lou, let me tell you something. If I was your coach, you'd have to get under the covers because I'm not a morning person, you know. But in any event, I came back and I went in to see Harry the following Monday and told him I wasn't taking the job. And I thought there'd be some angst about it, you know, and I had a lot of angst going in. And he was so great. He just said, yeah, I knew you wouldn't. Said, what are you talking about? This is the hottest decision I've ever had to make in my life. He says, yeah, I know. But, you know, I'll bet you when you're at BU, some April afternoon, some kid that played for you 5 years before comes in with his wife and his new baby to say hello again and talk to you. That never happens here, he said. Good reason to be a college hockey coach, he said. So I always told Harry I would have liked to have seen the first paycheck because it was a pretty good deal that he gave me. But I think I did the right thing by staying with BU, and BU did the right thing with me all those years too. That's for sure.
Well, you've certainly paid them back tenfold with all the accolades, all the championships, all the players that came through there that have gone on to success, and all the things you've had to deal with. What about NCAA championships, personal honors, Hockey Hall of Fame, U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame? What are the tops and what are the bottoms of a career like that, Jack Parker?
Well, winning national championships and, you know, winning ECAC championships when we first started out. I remember we won the ECACs my first 4 years. Nobody had ever done that before. It was really exciting that we did that. And, you know, that type of thing, winning 21 bean pots we were pretty good in the bean pots for a number of years, you know. But I think the thing that sticks out more than anything else regarding my 40 years at BU was I always tell this to people, the worst thing that ever happened to me as the coach at BU was the Travis Roy injury. And the best thing that ever happened to me as the coach at BU was how the hockey fraternity, the hockey world, turned around and helped out Travis Roy, how they all rallied around him. It was so sad, and then it was so unbelievable how everybody went out of their way to make sure Travis was going to be okay. And
what was that like for you from day one?
It was horrible. I mean, it was, you know, when he got hurt, I didn't even see it because Chris O'Sullivan had scored this opening goal of the game We were the defending national champions, and we were playing North Dakota in the opening game of the season. It was a big game, even though it was the first game of the year. And Chris went on the opening faceoff, went down and got a goal. And then he celebrated like it was the national championship on the ice. And I was upset with him, so I waited for it at the door, and I grabbed him and I ran down the runway and was giving him a piece of my mind down the runway while the next line went out. The next line went out was Chris Drury's line, and Travis was playing the wing on Chris's line. And that's when Travis got hurt. I come back up the runway, and Travis was already in the corner on the ice. I didn't see it happen. And it was a shock, and I didn't, I thought they'd take him to the hospital, and they'd come back and tell me he's going to miss a month or so. I had no idea how bad it was. Our orthopedic surgeon came back and told me how bad it was. It took me off the bench in the second period and said, hey, and told me the shocking news. And I was in a daze the rest of the game. I don't remember anything about it. I went back in the dressing room after the game was over. We had won. It was a big game, and kids were excited. But the minute we get in the dressing room, they all started saying, "Hey, what's going on with Trav? How's Travis?" And I said, "Sit down, boys." And I said, "There's a book called The Road Less Traveled, and in the book, the very first line in the book is, 'Life is difficult.'" And I remember telling these guys, from now on, life is going to become unbelievably difficult for your teammate Travis Roy, for his parents, and for every one of us. And we got to get used to it, and we got to figure out how to handle it. And it still didn't hit me until I lived in Melrose at the time, and I used to go after practice every day. I'd go see Travis at the hospital or at BU Medical. And I went over to the hospital. Each night I'd go over there, and his parents would be in the room. So I'd go in and shoot the breeze with him. And of course, he couldn't move. And then I think it was the fourth straight night, I walked in, and his parents were outside the room talking to the doctors. And they motioned to me to go ahead in and see Travis. So I walked in. And that was the first time I was alone with Travis. And we're shooting the breeze for a minute, and he said to me, "Hey, Coach, will you do me a favor?" I said, "Sure, Trav, what do you want?" He said, "Will you scratch my nose? My nose is so itchy, and I can't scratch my nose." And that's when it dawned on me how bad it was. And what he did with his life after that was the most amazing thing that ever happened to me, that's for sure, watching it. And I was close to it. We were very, very close for all the years until he died. He lived right down the street with me. I lived on Bay State Road. He did too. We lived 2 doors down when he came back to school. And we saw each other all the time, went to the movies all together, or to the movies together, and out to eat together all the time. He never came up to the rink much. He didn't want to be around the rink. He didn't want to watch much hockey. He was very upset that that was taken away from him. But he certainly did an awful lot for an awful lot of people with his foundation and what he did with his life in an unbelievable, difficult situation. When people have no idea how difficult it was for him just to get out of bed and get out of the house in the morning. But it took him 2.5 hours just to get out of bed, get cared for, and get dressed and go about his day. But when he came out of that house, he was smiling. You saw him on the street, you saw him at a function, you saw him anywhere. He was always upbeat and always looking to help somebody else and be positive with somebody else. And the things that his foundation did for all the people that were in his boat was just beyond belief.
Listen, you're not going to agree with me on this because of your nature and who you are, but there aren't many people in your position that would have. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe there are a lot of people in your position that would have done what you did. But let's take this as a singular issue. What you was pretty remarkable, Jack, the way you grasped onto him and helped him to do so many things and to make him feel comfortable in social situations. It's not to be taken lightly. I'm sorry if you don't agree with me, but it's not to be taken lightly.
It was just what else were they going to do? He was my guy. He was one of my players. And I was so happy that he came back to school and we were around together all the time. And then, of course, he knew my family, he knew my daughters, he knew my wife. We were constantly across the street at Eastern Standard having dinner with the whole family and Travis. And then Lee and Brenda would come into town and they'd stay. And Lee from the UVM days, and Lee from Swampscott High, and just a fabulous guy and fabulous people. So it was easy to love Travis Roy, but it was also easy to see how an amazing human being he was and what he did. You know, I learned more from Travis and he did more for me than I did for him. I'll tell you that.
Jack, when he moved to Vermont just before he passed away, did he know the end was near? And is that where he wanted to be?
Yes, that was absolutely. He had a beautiful house up there. They have a compound up in the lake, beautiful area, and he had a big porch that he could sit on his porch and look at the lake. And he had a boat, a pontoon boat that he could get out on the boat and out in the lake. So he really loved that. And of course, that was his area. His parents grew up in that area, so he was very, very comfortable up there. But he knew the end was near. That that the days were running out. I'm surprised he lasted as long as he did. You know, people don't last that long, and he was pretty determined to take care of himself as best he could, as in all the ways he was supposed to take care of himself, and moving his chair, moving his bed, not getting infections and all that stuff. But it's finally caught up to him, and I said goodbye to him a few days before he died, and it's like he's in the other room now. It's like he's still around.
Yeah, a relationship. I mean, that's a movie in itself. You talk about Miracle, a hell of a movie, but the relationship between coach and player, Travis and Jack, is something I'll never forget. Just observing you from afar, talking to Mike Caruso and an awful lot, and what's going on in different people. This was something you never expected, but it's something you handled as well as anybody on this planet could have handled, Jack.
Well, I appreciate that. People know that I was around Travis all the time, but a lot of people don't know how many other people were unbelievable, going out of their way day in and day out to see what they could do for Travis Roy. It was, one of my real good friends is the former president of Harvard University, Larry Backow.
Oh yeah,
like Mike, he is.
Yeah.
Larry was a big Bobby Orr fan. I mean, a huge Bobby Orr fan when he was growing up. When he was teaching at MIT in the 70s at the time. In any event, Bobby Orr called me up one day and asked me if I could do him a favor. It was a Sunday night before a Beanpot final, and he was in Florida, but 4 of his good friends were up in Boston. Is there any way I could get him tickets to get him into the Garden for the Beanpot tomorrow night? I said, sure, you're lucky. I got 4 tickets right here. BU had lost the semifinal game. I got 6 tickets right here. Give me the telephone, I'll take care of it. And then he said to me, Jack, thank you so much. If there's anything I can do for you. I said, Bobby, are you serious? I already have a big debt to you for what you did for Travis Roy. Nobody has any idea what Bobby Orr did for Travis Roy except me, Bobby, and Travis's family, and a few other people in the foundation. But he was unbelievable. And it wasn't just Travis. Bobby Orr did that for everybody. Everybody that had a hard time, Bobby was like that. And nobody knew it. I mean, he didn't want any credit for it. So I said, no, don't worry about it. And then I said, but there is one thing you can do for me, Bobby. One of my best friends is retiring as the president of Harvard University this summer. And he was a big Bobby Orr fan. He was such a Bobby Orr fan that in 1971, he was getting married, and he sent you an invitation to his wedding just to see if he'd get a reply from Bobby Orr after you won him the cup, I said, so if you could just send him a picture or something, say congratulations. He said, I got a brand new book coming out called Bobby Orr in Pictures. I just got it today. He said, I'll send him one. I said, oh, that's great. About 3 days later, in the mail, a book comes to my house, Bobby Orr in Pictures. And it's signed by Bobby. Bob, Jack, thanks for taking care of my guys. They had a ball at the Beanpot. Your friend, Bobby Orr. And I said to Jackie, I said, geez, he must have forgot. He sent me the book instead of Larry Backow. And then 2 days later, Larry calls me laughing. I said, what's so funny? He says, you know what's so funny? I said, no. He said, I just got a book from Bobby Orr. I said, oh, yeah. I said, how come you didn't call me earlier? He said he was away for 5 days. That's why I didn't get the book. Said, do you know how he signed it? I said, no. So he sent me the book. And in the book, it said, Larry, congratulations on your upcoming retirement at Harvard University's president. Great going. Your friend, Bobby Orr. P.S. Sorry I missed your wedding. So that's going to be on Backhow's coffee table for the rest of his life.
Absolutely.
There were people like Bobby Orr that did unbelievable things for Travis, including Mike Rizzioni. and it went on for years. It went on for years. But he deserved it too, because of everything he did, the way he conducted his life after the injury,
Yeah, without question. So, Jack, everybody knows that you're a BU guy, you're a CM guy, but you're a Somerville guy, and you're supposed to be dribbling a basketball and, not shooting a hockey puck.
Yeah.
So how did you wind up with the stick in your hand as opposed to a round ball?
I mentioned earlier, it was pure luck that I became a hockey coach. It was pure luck that I became a hockey player. I was a basketball player, right? And so everybody in Somerville played basketball and baseball. Yeah. Somerville was really, really good in those two sports for years. And I was a basketball player. They had a CYO circuit in Somerville. I think we had 7 parishes in Somerville, and every parish had their own basketball team for the kids that went to those schools. And we all played all the time. It was a good feeder system for the Somerville High basketball team, But I was definitely I never thought about playing hockey. I had a twin brother, Bob, who started playing hockey when we were in the 7th grade. Went to the Belmont Pee-wees up in Belmont, Mass, and played outdoors in the rink up there at the Belmont Hills School. And he thought this was the sport he was going to play, and I was a basketball player, and that was okay with me until Christmas time came, and all of a sudden he was getting Northland Pro hockey sticks and brand new pair of Tackleberry skates and a Gordie House shirt, game shirt. I was getting a pair of sneakers and a basketball. It didn't seem fair, So I started playing hockey just because he played, and I never played any other than pond hockey until I was in the 8th grade. I started illegally playing for the Somerville Junior High hockey team, and Joe Quinn was the coach then, and he got myself and my brother Bob to play on that team. That was the first time I was ever on a rink. And then I decided to go to Malden. I almost went to Catholic Memorial to play basketball, and I almost went to Matignon to play basketball, but and Matignon didn't have hockey in those days. So I went to I still wasn't undecided. So I went to Malden Catholic with my brother Bob, figuring I'll figure it out whether or not which sport I'll try out for. And my first month at Malden Catholic, all the guys in my class, all the guys I was hanging around with, all the cool guys that I thought were going to be my friends the rest of my life. Dave Pollard, David Pollard.
Yeah.
Billy Lynch, a bunch of guys, Kevin Majeski, they were all in my classes, and they were all trying out for the hockey team. So I'll try out for the hockey team. That was how I did that. And then I wound up at Catholic Memorial for weird reasons. And then my coach there was Joe Quinn, the guy that was my junior high coach. So,
wow.
And then I became a hockey player and went to BU.
Well, we have to spend a little time talking about some sponsors, Jack. So this is where you're involved in this particular one. I know you're a sailor. You probably have been a sailor most of your life, correct?
No, I didn't.
No.
I grew up in Somerville.
Okay, right.
Not many yacht clubs in Somerville.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, how about camping? Do you camp? Do you ever
No, never did that either.
Come on.
We had a cottage when we were kids. We had a cottage down the Cape that we went to the day school got out, and we come back 2 days before school started to buy a pair of shoes. So we were down in Dennis, Mass, down the Cape when we were little kids all summer long. But I never did any sailing down there with swimming and all that stuff. And then when I think we were 15, the Parker twins told our parents, "We're not going to the Cape anymore." What do you mean? That's what we do in the summer. We go to the Cape. Yeah, we're not going anymore. Why not? We got to be in Lynn Arena and play summer hockey. We're going to play summer hockey. We made our parents sell the house down there because we wouldn't go anymore.
Okay, so you never did any camping. Okay, that's fine.
No, so I wound up getting into sailing because of Ben Smith, who was a high school and college player that I played against in high school and college all the time. Knew him very well, and then he became my assistant coach. When in the year I hired him, he taught me how to sail and got me involved in the yacht club, and I've been hooked on sailing ever since. So that was 1981. So I didn't do any sailing before that, but I'm obsessed about it now. I love it.
Yeah, well, you ought to be sailing instead of playing golf. It's a much more rewarding event, I'm sure. So here's what I need to talk, Jack, about this. Our conversations with Cold Springs RV in Ware, New Hampshire. Where is west of Goffstown and north of Tingsboro? I don't know if you know where it is, Jack, but where in New Hampshire? I don't know how
It's all happening.
it is. It's where it's all happening. You can go in there and they have fifth wheelers, park models, travel trailers, pop-ups, motorhomes. Cold Springs RV is the place to go. Pressure-free environment. Find the RV of your dreams. It's about freedom. You can go there, you can pick up and go somewhere else anytime you want to. Cold Springs RV, you and your family can shop with ease and tell them Lynchy and Lobel sent you. So make it a summer to remember with a camper in Cold Springs RV in Ware, New Hampshire.
Where?
That's exactly where. And here's a question that Mike has for you, Jack, and this is pretty cool.
All right, so Jack, here we go. We ask every guest the same question.
Yep.
We don't pay guests, as you probably figured out by now.
Well, we don't pay hosts either, so don't worry about it.
That's why Rosione's not on, right?
Right. It's exactly. Remember John Madden didn't like to fly. He had a Madden cruiser. He had a bus took him everywhere.
Yeah.
So Cold Springs RV, we're going to have to make a very special Lobel Lynchy cruiser. It's going to be 10 times better than John Madden's thing ever was. So we're going to give every guest on the show gets to use the Lobel Lynchy cruiser for 7 days.
Wow.
Right? We'll drop it off in Gloucester. You can drive it all the way to the West Coast. We'll fly you home after 7 days. The only thing is you have to pick somebody to ride shotgun with you, who you'd like to ride across country with, have a conversation with. It could be somebody alive, deceased, past, present, sports. It could be politics. It could be entertainment. But somebody, and don't pick your wife, all right?
Yeah, Jackie, that's too easy, Jackie. That's too easy.
Well, it'd be pretty tough to have a conversation with somebody who's deceased, too.
So anybody that you'd like to ride cross country with and just have a conversation with or just a good time with that you think would be fun?
If I could go across country in an RV with anybody, I'd like to go with Bill Russell.
Really?
Yeah.
Good pick.
Greatest athlete of all time.
Yeah.
One of the all-time cool class acts. He said that he's not sure he's going to be happy if he goes to heaven because it might be a step down from what it was playing for the Boston Celtics. As much as he'd had a hard time with the city of Boston, he did love the Celtics. And whenever anybody starts talking about Michael Jordan or any of the current greats in the NBA, I always think, how can you get by Russell? He won 11 out of 13.
Yeah.
No, he's one of the all-time class acts, and I wore number 6 because of Bill Russell. And when I was a kid, he was, you could sneak in the garden anytime you want. Some of you know how to get in the garden and see those games.
Yeah.
There was nobody in the stands. They were winning all those championships, and unless it was until the playoffs game, there was a half a house all the time. Yeah. And Bobby Orr arrived, and you couldn't get a seat, even though they were in last place. You couldn't get a seat in the Bruins games, But I would love to have a conversation with Bill Russell.
What are some of the things you'd want to talk to him about?
I'd ask him stuff that I heard him say, and have him elaborate on it. For example, when he was player coach of the Celtics, they played an exhibition game in New Orleans against, I forget who they played, but New Orleans, they were thinking about expanding in the NBA to New Orleans, and they were testing the market out, and they played an exhibition game there. And Bill Russell's grandfather was from New Orleans. His father took him out of there during the Jim Crow area and took him to San Francisco, and that's how he wound out on the West Coast. But he was from New Orleans originally, and his family was. And so when he had the Celtics were playing, and Russell's father took Russell's grandfather to the game, and they sat right behind the bench. And Russell's playing the game, of course, and all of a sudden there's a timeout, 8 minutes gone in the period, and he comes over and he gets out the chalkboard and he starts got the guys on the bench and he's showing them a play. And the grandfather looks at the father and says, "What is he doing?" And the father said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, not only is he the star player, but he's the boss of the team too. He's the coach." And the grandfather said, "He's the boss, even of the white guys?" So he grew up in a different era than you and I grew up in.
No kidding.
I would like to have him, tell me how tough it was to be,
Right.
who he was growing. I mean, I think he came in. He wound up third in all state voting, third team all state his senior year in San Francisco in California. A few years later, he's the greatest player in college basketball at the time. Nobody knew it, but he won back-to-back championships at San Francisco. And you know how many championships San Francisco's won before or after that? None. Well, he's always been my favorite guy, and I always thought he was. Every time he ever got interviewed, he seemed like a real cool guy.
Yeah, that's a fascinating answer, and maybe we might let you have the cruiser for 10 days. Maybe we can go a little bit longer.
Well, Russ is no longer with us.
What about favorite? What about? Do you dare pick favorite players that you've had? People that have excelled or gone beyond what you ever thought was possible. Maybe the choices are obvious. Maybe they're the four guys that were on that U.S. Olympic hockey team.
I could give you 44, and every one of them would foot the bill as number one. Ricky Mahada, only 3-time All-American in BU history. Vic Stanfield, 2-year All-American in BU. We had all kinds of great forwards on those teams when Vic played for me. He led the team in scoring both years, as a defenseman. I mean, Jimmy Craig was one of the all-time great goalies at BU. Cleon Daskalakis was a great goalie. John Curry was a great goalie. Tony Amonte and Keith Kachuk and Sean McEachran and those guys in the 90s. We had so many great players. I coached there for 40 years, and the reason why I coached for 40 years is because we kept winning. You're not allowed to keep coaching if you don't win. The reason why we kept coaching or kept winning is because I had great players all the time, almost all the time. So you could pick a decade, and I'd say, yeah, he was Vic Stanfield. He's the best defenseman I ever had. What about Matt Gilroy? He won the Hobie Baker. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. So it would be real difficult to say that to pick one guy. But I will say that I had a fabulous relationship with all of them for the most part. And it's fun seeing what they've done since then. Some of them have gone on to be great pros, and some of them have gone on to be great coaches. I talked to Mike Sullivan the other day when it was announced that he just signed with the New York Rangers to be their new head coach. And I believe he's signed the highest contract in the history of the NHL to coach the NHL. And I called him up. I said, Mike, congratulations, blah, 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 blah. I said, you just signed the biggest contract in the history of the NHL to coach. Chris Drury, one of my former great players, just re-upped as president and general manager for 3 more years of the New York Rangers. You're hiring Joe Sacco, and another great player of mine, and David Quinn, another great player of mine, to be your assistant coaches. Any of you guys figure me in for 10% along the way here? I'm just another fella around here. My players don't know how to divide, We certainly have all done pretty well.
Yes, they have. Hey, Jack, tell a story about one of your former players, Toot Cahoon, who was your assistant coach one time. And I think you were getting ready to play for the national championship, and you asked Toot to give a speech to the team. And just tell the story.
Yeah, Toot was my first 5 years. He was my assistant coach, and then he came back, and I think he did 2 other stints with me. So he kept coming back. But I have a great relationship. He's a fabulous guy. He was a very successful coach at Princeton, very successful coach at UMass Amherst. But in any event, he's my assistant coach, and we're getting ready to go play Denver in the national tournament. I believe this was the second time he was my assistant, because I think Drury was one of the stars of that team. And we're getting ready to play Denver in the semifinal, or in the national tournament. And the kids are stretching out. The practice is over. It's our last practice, and then we're going to leave to go down and play. I think it was in Worcester the games were. And I said, hey, tell the boys about your hat trick you got against Denver in the national tournament in 1971. And Mike, you know too pretty well. No, I don't want to tell. No, come on, tell them about it. No, I don't want to tell them about it. So now we're leaving. All the kids are off the ice. We're leaving, getting off the ice. I said, geez, why didn't you tell them that? He said, yeah, I was thinking about it, but I was going to tell him the year I ran for 2 and threw for 2 on Turkey Day in the only game Dick Jaron ever lost. Quarterback, the Swamps get high. So Big Blue football goes bigger than anything else, Mike, in those guys' eyes and your guys' eyes. But 2 was a great assistant coach and a great coach after he left me, and one of my best friends to this day.
Hey, let me ask you this question. I know it's unfair to ask your favorite player. Who was the most skilled player that ever came through your system?
2 guys jump out at me. Ricky Mahar, because he was an unbelievable skater. He could really handle the puck, but he was an unbelievable skater. And Tony Amonte, who was a fabulous puck handler and great vision on the ice. He could see things happen. And those 2 guys were probably the most skilled guys. Chris Drury was an unbelievable player, Hobie Baker Award winner. But the thing that made Chris Drury great was not just that he was a great skill and a great could skate and he was physical and all that stuff. But Chris Drury was an unbelievable competitor. If you woke up Chris Drury at 3 o'clock in the morning and told him you had a pickup game at the Boston Skating Club, he'd get dressed and he'd come over and he would have to beat that guy to the puck in the corner. There was no way he would, it's in his DNA. He was, Jack O'Callahan was like that too, an unbelievable competitor. But I had so many great players that, some were great just simply because they were pure, unadulterated talent. But most of them were great because they had talent and they wanted to be as good as they could be, and they wanted to be better than the guy lining up opposite them. They were real competitors. And I was blessed with those guys for many, many years. When we would recruit players, I would always tell my assistants, make sure you talk to the parents and make sure you get a feel for what the parents are like. Because when you're talking to the kid and you're recruiting him, you're getting him on his best behavior. You're not sure what you're getting when you're talking to the player when he's 18 years old. But when you're talking to the parents, they're going to let you know who they are. And if the father's a jerk, probably the kid is going to be a jerk too, We used to have a saying that my twin brother always used to say, kids do not grow up like the neighbors. So it was important that we got really good players as well as really good talent. And
How different is it today, Jack? How different?
I think it's enormously different. When I was coaching up until the very end, and I think even till the very end, all the kids I was recruiting, you know what they wanted to do? They wanted to be college hockey players. They wanted to play for BC or BU or Harvard or Michigan State. They were dying to go to college and play for the school they rooted for. And they were going to play for 4 years. They weren't thinking about, I'm here for 2, and then I'll win a bean pot, and then I'll move on to the pros. But 1980 changed a lot of that because the pros weren't looking at college kids until 1980. But when the college kids won the gold medal, maybe these kids can play. And all of a sudden, those guys were getting a chance to play in the NHL, and they got a chance ever since then. So I think the 1980 team changed it for college hockey. The college players were now being looked at more seriously. And now they're getting drafted. They're thinking to come to BC or BU, play in the power play, win a bean pot, and then move on to my pro team and see what I can do there. And it's completely different. Now with the NIL, it's like I talked to my friend Bill O'Flaherty about it, who was a long-time coach at Clarkson. And I said to him, Billy, what about this NIL? This is about a year and a half ago. What about this NIL stuff? How these kids jump a ship anytime they want? He said to me, yeah, I know, Jack. It's unbelievable. If they had this when you were coaching, you wouldn't have anybody in your dressing room. Excuse me. But it's when Chris Drury was a freshman at BU, he was the 4th line center. You think he would have stuck around now? See you later, coach. I belong in the power play. Yeah.
Right.
Speaking of another guy like that, who almost did not become a BU Terrier, Micah Ruzioni. Where was he headed?
Didn't he go to? He's going to go to Maryland, but wasn't he going to go to UNH? And Charlie Holt told him he couldn't play there.
I'm not sure that conversation. There was a conversation, and Charlie didn't encourage him. My conversation with Mike was I had seen him play in high school, but then he went to prep school, and I didn't see him play, and he kind of got off my radar. And I was the chief recruiter. I was not the head coach at BU at the time. Leon Abbott was the head coach. I was I was the freshman coach and assistant coach and recruiter. And so in any event, I got 2 kids coming. I know are coming. They're going to be great players. Can't miss. 2 Canadian kids, one from Toronto, one from West Island, Montreal. And they call me in April and tell me they've made up their mind. Oh, great. One of them told me he's going to Notre Dame, and the other one tells me he's going to Michigan. I'm sitting here in late April holding 2 scholarships. And in those days, I used to referee a lot. So I had a game that night both kids had told me within a week that they weren't coming to BU. So now I got 2 scholarships. I go to referee at Hockeytown in Melrose, kind of a college all-star type of thing or high school all-star type of thing. And Micah Rizioni was playing, and he was the best player on the ice. And even if the game was over, I still got the referee stuff on. I grab him before he gets off the ice. Mike, where are you going to school next year? And he said, I think I'm going to go to Merrimack College. I said, Merrimack College, how come Division II? How come you're not going to a Division I school? He said, because nobody in Division I was talking to me. I said, I'm talking to you. I got him to come to BU, and then about 4 days later, I called up a player on my freshman team who was going to be a really star player on the varsity, but he was from Belleville, Ontario. And I said, Terry, I hear your younger brother's a real good player. Do you think he'd be in? Where's he going to school? He says, I think he's going to Clarkson. I said, do you think he'd be interested to following you here? Oh, he'd come to BU in a minute. I said, okay, I'll give him a call. I call him the next day, and Ricky Mahar told me he'd come. So Ricky Mahar and Micah Rizioni fill in for those 2 guys. Ricky Mahar and Micah Rizioni wind up 1 and 2 in scoring in BU history. I mentioned earlier, Ricky's the only 3-time All-American in BU history. So that was the luck of, recruiting wasn't as much of a science as they make it out to be, And by the way, those 2 guys that I didn't get, Alex Paris and Pat Murphy, they wound up All-Americans at those 2 schools. So I wasn't wrong on those 2, but I didn't get them. But I was glad I got Mahar and Rizioni, I'll tell you that.
I'm sure you were.
Did Herb Brooks have any reservations about any of the 4 BU guys or Eastern guys that were going to be on this 1980 Olympic team?
I think Herbie did his homework with every kid that was trying out, whether they be Western guys. He didn't have to do his homework about the Minnesota kids he was going to choose at the University of Minnesota, but there was Wisconsin kids and Michigan kids and BU kids and Harvard kids trying out and BC kids. So he was calling those coaches and it got down to the wire when the last couple of cuts, and he called me about 2 of my guys, Rizioni and David Silk. I think O'Callahan and Craig. Craig was an automatic. He was going to be on no matter what. He was the number 1 goalie for sure. And I think O'Callahan was an automatic as well. But Mike and David were a little bit on the bubble, and he was checking in with me to ask me questions about those 2 guys. And fortunately for me, he took my advice and took them both, and they both turned out to be very, very important players on that gold medal winning team.
Yeah, they both had big games against the Russians too.
Yeah, and I remember telling Herbie that everybody thinks Dave Silk is a great goal scorer. He's a great offensive player, and he is. But he's an unbelievable competitor, and he's a terrific defensive player. And I guarantee you, when the game is on the line, he'll be the right wing you have out on the ice to make sure he gets the puck out of the zone for you when you're winning by a goal. And sure enough, when they're playing the Russians and up by a goal, puck goes to the right wing, and there's David Silk chipping it out in the center ice as the clock winds down. Do you believe in miracles is talking, but Silky's the guy that got it out in the center ice, so there was no more shots on net by the Soviets. And they both, obviously, along with Jack and Jimmy, had fabulous contributions to that team. And they, it was a real feather in the BU program's hat that only 4 Eastern guys made it, and they were 4 BU guys.
Yeah.
Because there were an awful lot of good hockey players at BC, at Maine, at Northeastern, at BU, at Harvard, that came close, but they didn't make it that year.
Yeah, all the great athletes at Harvard played football anyway.
Or baseball.
Oh, baseball, yeah. Jack Turco is one of the all-time great Harvard athletes. He's a terrific high school hockey player at Melrose, athlete at Melrose, quarterback of the football team, quarterback, catcher on the baseball team, starting center on the hockey team. And he went to Harvard and played both baseball and hockey at Harvard, and was a star in both, but also played football his freshman year as the quarterback of the football team. So
yeah, he did.
In those days, you could play you could play a couple of sports in
Yeah.
college.
Yeah.
And the Ivy Leagues made it much easier for you to do that because they didn't start till a little bit later in the sports, and so it was pretty cool to see.
You know what was incredible? We'd have guys. The Frozen Four was in Michigan Tech, I think, won it that year in '75, and I was on the football and baseball team, and so I think we lost on like a Saturday night, and Monday afternoon we're playing BC in baseball, and there's 4 guys that played in that hockey game that are starting on the baseball team.
Yep.
It was just like blink of an eye. Okay, it's time to play baseball. Let's go. Lee Hogan was one of the great players.
Know Lee very well. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
He was a very good baseball player too.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I was playing at BU, Herb Wakabayashi was a 2-time All-American from Chatham, Ontario. He was a starting second baseman in all New England for BU.
Right.
Tom Ross was an All-American defenseman for us. He was a starting first baseman for the BU baseball team. They were both really good baseball players.
Yeah.
And Mike Telfer, was captain of my team in '89. He was a terrific baseball player at BU.
Jack, you started this show talking about how lucky you were, how everything kind of was an accident.
It was.
Well, I'm saying it right. This became this, became this, became this, became this. What would you have done if none of this had happened?
Hey, that was my question I was going to ask.
Well, I'm sorry, Mike. You got to raise your hand.
I was talking to Ben Smith, my former assistant coach, longtime USA hockey coach, and former Northeastern coach as well. And Ben, I was talking to him this morning, and I forget how we got on the subject, but I said to him, I know I've said this to you before, Ben, but I've told people this 100 times. What would I have done if BU fired me? I wasn't prepared to do anything else in my life. I always thought that I was a good student in college. I was a good student in high school. I was a good student in college. School came easy to me. The best professor I ever had at BU was Jack Kelly, my hockey coach. He knew his subject better than all my other professors, and he taught that subject better than all my other professors. And so I kind of fell into, I still had no inclination. I was going to be a banker. I was a finance major in the business school, but Billy Riley, my line mate and good friend at the time, was a phys ed major, was going to be a high school hockey coach at Medford and teach phys ed at Medford High School when we graduated. And then in, I think, July, he got a call to become a trainer for Lehigh University and be the head trainer or assistant head trainer down there, and also be the head coach of their club team that they said they would make varsity in 2 years. So he left Medford, hadn't even started the job yet. And he called me up and said, "You got to take this job. They want a BU guy, and I can't. I'm leaving." I said, "I can't take that banker." He said, "Well, you got to take that job." I said, "Well, let me think about it." And I wait 2 days, and I called him back. I said, "Tell him I'll take the job." And I immediately quit my banking job and got an insurance adjuster's job where you could have plenty of time on your own. And I wound up coaching at Medford High for 1 year, and then the next year, Jack Kelly hired me to be his assistant at BU. So now it was like I was in 4 years of hockey education under Jack Kelly as a player, and now I'm his assistant coach for 3 years. I'm in graduate school of hockey with him, and it just fell into place. And then all of a sudden, the head coach at Leon Abbott got absolutely screwed by BU and got fired, and they appointed me the head coach by accident. And I stayed there for 40 years.
That was like 6 games into that season where you were appointed the head coach when they dismissed Leon Abbott. By the way, the name of my Legion baseball team and growing up was Leon Abbott, post 57.
Is that right? No relation. Yeah. The main one's from Canada.
But that must have been something, huh? Half dozen games into the season, you're the head coach, Jack. Where do I go now?
Well, I think I was 27, 28. I'm not sure. And Leon and I came back from a recruiting trip. We were in Montreal. It was winter break, Christmas break, and we always made the kids come back before Christmas. We'd put them up in the local kids' houses and what have you. So I think the first practice was going to be the 21st, and we came back on the 20th. And I got a call that night from the director of athletics telling me, "I want you in the office tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock." I said, "Well, fine, I'll be there. We got practice at 10. So what's this all about?" He said, "I'll tell you when you get here." Okay, so I walked in the office, the dean of students and the dean of athletics and the athletic director. And I walked in, they said to me, "We just fired Leon Abbott, and your contract says as assistant coach we can appoint you. Other duties we're appointing you as head coach. And I said, you're not appointing me anything yet until where's Leon? He said he's out downstairs cleaning out his. So I went down to see Leon. I said, what's going on? He said, well, I knew I was going to get fired at the end of the year, Jack. I didn't think they'd fire me right now, but I said, well, they just told me to take these. Well, don't take the job for sure, but don't take it at your salary. Take it at my salary. Go in and tell them you want a bump, and you'll take it. So that's what I did. So then the dean says to the AD, go take Jack down to the team's getting ready to go to practice. Go take Jack down and tell him what's going on. So we go in the dressing room, and the athletic director says, gentlemen, listen up. We've fired Leon Abbott as your head coach. Your new head coach is Jack Parker here. Good luck. And he walks out. Now I'm sitting there dumbfounded, right? So I just look at my watch. I say, guys, it's 20 minutes to 10. Practice is at 10. Make sure you're on the ice in time. And I walk out. This is the honest truth. I walk out. The dressing room was right next door where I got dressed. So now I'm sitting in my seat, getting my skates on. All of a sudden, there's a bang, bang, bang on my steel door. I open it up. It's freshman Micah Rizzioni. Can I talk to you, coach? I said, oh, boy, here we go. I said, yeah, Mike, come on in, sit down. I said, what's up? He looks at me dead serious. He says, can I get a new pair of skates? I said, what? He said, can I get a new pair of skates? I said, how come you didn't get a new pair of skates in the fall? He says, because Coach Abbott told me he wasn't sure I was going to make the team, so he wasn't going to give me skates yet. I said, Mike, go see the equipment manager and tell him that I told you to get a pair of skates. I'm sure you're going to make the team. Don't worry about it. So he leaves, closed the door, and all I could think of is, the king is dead. Long live the king. That other guy wouldn't give me skates. Maybe this fool will, you know?
What do you think of the Bruins drafting the 6 BC guys? And what do you think about Higgins and his potential as a pro?
I didn't see him play that much this year. You know, I only saw him play against the BC BU games. But let me tell you something. If you get a terrific player out of Hockey East, you got a guy that's going to be a definite chance to have a big upside in the NHL. Most of those guys that were terrific players in Hockey East are good enough to be real good players in the NHL. You know, the 2 guys that left BU 2 years ago that were up for Rookie of the Year this past year, out in San Jose and up in Montreal, they were star players in Hockey East. You know what? They're star players in the NHL. So I'm sure that the same will hold true with a couple of kids that are that good. And now, if you're a 5th round pick in Hockey East and you haven't been all league, and you know that's a little different. But Hockey East has produced an awful lot of great players for a long time, and I think that when push comes to shove, that those guys will have a real good chance to be NHLers, and another feather in the BC program's cap for those guys to be BC reps playing in the NHL. And certainly BU has got numerous guys that played for me and played for David Quinn and played for Albie O'Connell and played for Jay Pandolfo that are big time NHLers now. You know, so it's a lot of fun watching that. It's a completely different thing. That didn't happen early on, but it's happening now all over the place.
One last question, Mike, before you do the George Gray commercial.
Sure, Bob.
How was Patino to work with?
Patino was a class act when he was at BU. I really liked him a lot. Of course, it was his first head job. He was, you know, he wasn't Rick Pitino yet, you know. And I talk to him every once in a while, but never seriously. Just, you know, something like he called me on that Bruins thing, wondering if I was going to be in the office next to him, stuff like that. But when he was at BU, he was a terrific coach, real serious about making BU basketball really important. Wasn't there as a step. It didn't seem like can't wait to get out of here, you know. He did the best he could for BU when he was there. And he was a real good coach there. And that's why he got the next job, because he was such a real good coach at BU. And I know a few of his former players. One guy just called me, one of his former players, to congratulate me on the Hall of Fame thing. That still hold Rick dear to their hearts because he was so important to them when they were students at BU. So he was a class act when he was at BU, and he was always going to be a big time coach. You know, he was a terrific coach.
You know, every time I come over to interview you, it seems like it was lunchtime, and you're never in your office. You're never on the hockey rink. You're always upstairs, either on the roof or in the gym, playing pickup basketball. How many days a week would you do that?
I do that 4 days a week. It would be the football coaches and the basketball coaches and myself. As I said, I played a lot of basketball when I was a kid, so I could hold my own against these guys. One of the things that was Rick would play in those games. He was a terrific player, and he would play in those games, and he could score when he wanted to, but he had an assistant coach with him, and he elbowed the guy in the head one time. The guy was covering him too close. What is going on here? But the last time I played, football was no longer football, so we had no football coaches to play with. So it was just basketball 3-on-3. It was always 4-on-4 or 3-on-3. It was never full court, but it was always 3-on-3 basketball later on. And Dennis Wolf was the basketball coach, and all the coaches, his assistants, would play plus me, and therefore one of the assistant basketball coaches would have to cover Dennis, and they'd never cover him because he was the head coach, and they'd let him take any shot he wanted to. One day I'm competitive. I'm getting a little aggravated. And I said, hey, how about I'll pick the teams, and I never wanted to be on Dennis's team because he shot the ball all the time. So I'll pick the teams, but I'm going to make sure that one of the guys that plays for me is going to make sure he covers Dennis. And I would play another game, gets a little more heated now that Dennis is being covered a little bit more, and they get in a fight. The assistant coach and the head coach get in a fight. The last time we played basketball, it never happened again.
And Jack, you've been a great guest. We really enjoyed it. And you know what? This one worked. Three times a charm.
I'm sorry it took so long to get on here with you.
No, you were great. Mike's got one
Yeah,
more.
I got to get another spot in for our good friend George Gray. Hey, if you're thinking about a new car, go where Lobel and Lynch go see our good friend George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. We've been customers for years because we know that George Gray will treat you right. They're a family-owned and operated dealership that we trust, and you can trust as well. Go see the big wheel, we call him, the great George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. George is a big sports fan. He's a big fan of yours, Jack. And
you did that well, Mike. That Harvard education really paid off.
Yeah, that's why Lobel has me do it, because Lobel would take 3 or 4 takes. So I do all the reading and all the stuff.
Absolutely. As it should be, Michael, as it should be.
Yeah, this was spectacular, Jack. So
one other thing, Mike, before we go, it was nice of you to say that your dad would have been proud of me.
Oh, yeah.
A fellow Ontario. That was awful nice. Yeah, he was a class act, and I loved being around. I only got to know him because of you, and he was really something.
Every time we'd be together, Bob, at either sad events or happy events, I'd always look in the corner, and there'd be 2 people there standing talking to each other, Jack Parker and Dick Lynch. They were the only 2 BU guys in the room, so they were.
That's because I wanted to hear Billy Hinch stories too.
Right. Billy Hinch always told my dad, and he was one of your teammates at BU.
Right.
But he always told my dad, he said, I'm a tough guy, Mr. Lynch. I can beat anybody. He said, Billy, no matter how tough you think you are, there's always somebody out there that's tougher. But he tried to beat everybody up.
Oh, my God. He was something. He was as tough as nails. Yeah. On the ice, off the ice. You wouldn't want to get in a confrontation with him. He was my best friend. I was best man in his wedding. I made sure I stayed close to Billy Hinch.
Well, Jack, this was spectacular. I can't thank you enough. And thank you, grandson, by the way, for setting this whole thing up. This looks very professional. Not like what you set up yesterday. We saw your forehead most of the time.
My balding head. Yeah.
Join the club.
I can't tell you how great it is to see you 2 guys too. It's been a long time, and I see Lynchy more than I see you, Bob. But great seeing you both. Take care.
It was great seeing you too. I miss those times, and believe me, if you got a chance to watch Miracle again, you won't be disappointed. It'll bring you right back to some.
I know how it comes out.
Yeah.
All right, Coach.
Enjoy it.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jack.
Jack Parker has been our guest. Make sure you follow us on unanchoredboston.com.